Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So I've been out a little bit recently, and it's because I had a couple of little setbacks on obtaining guitars. This actually isn't the guitar I plan to bring to you today, but I'll get more into that in a second. This is a 2014 Squier Affinity, and it's a gold label Strat. Nothing really special here, but it's an example of something you'll find commonly on Facebook Marketplace, and you can pick them up between 50 and 75 bucks usually. These do have quite a few differences between the Strat Pack or the SE Squier Stratocasters that I normally work on and use for parts. Before I get too far into this one, let me show you what's going to be next up on the bench so you have something to look forward to in future episodes. This is a 2002 Squier Showmaster, and I believe it's a Jason Ellis signature model. I wanted to bring it to you this time, but it's a little bit too far gone and I've got to get a few parts lined up, even just to attempt to bring it back. But we'll get into this one totally in a future episode. I just wanted to show you and give you a little teaser. Alright, so back to the 14 Affinity. I've shown you Affinities and Bullets and other similar Stratocasters before. What characterizes these of this vintage is a relatively thin body, so they're fairly lightweight. In terms of electronics, these have staggered pole pickups that have concentric circles on the magnets. And we'll actually take the neck off here in a moment, and I'll show you what the underside of this pickguard looks like. Note that these have a large headstock, and I'll show you a close-up picture of that here in a moment. But they have a large gold Squier logo, Squier 2-pin tuners on the back of the headstock, and they have a truss rod hole liner. These are made in Indonesia rather than being made in China. And to be honest, I don't know if all these features are exclusive to the Indonesian guitars or if some of the Chinese ones share that, but I don't believe I've ever seen a truss rod hole liner on a Chinese Squier. The neck appears to be a rosewood fretboard on a maple neck, and I believe that these have a skunk stripe on the back, and this one definitely does. So that's quite a bit different than like the SE Squiers and some of the other ones I've shown you that just have a plain maple neck. I think this one's mostly stock, although it has a black back plate, even though it has a white pickguard on the front, so I suspect this may have been changed. I'm going to get to work on this one first by doing a quick cleanup of the body. Alright, well after the cleanup I can tell I've got a couple little scuffs to deal with, and they're mostly on the back. I'm not sure what these are. They appear to be on top of the paint, but they're white, so I'm going to try to use a little bit of polish to remove them. Sometimes for little jobs like this, I like to use Meguiar Scratch X. In this case, I think I'm going to try actually a little bit of semi-chrome metal polish, because that sometimes takes off small little paint marks like this. Yeah, that's taken that off perfectly. I'll try it on this plastic here as well. It's doing a pretty good job there also. I think I'll have to get the screw out to get that totally. Let me just try a couple more marks. Alright, well that's taking these little marks out perfectly, although I did just notice I've got a little crack that runs all the way up the body here, and I'm assuming that's from being dropped on this lower pin here. Let me open this up and see if that crack goes any deeper than the finish. Well, it does appear to stop here at the surface, so that's a good thing. At this point in time, I don't know if I'll even bother dealing with that because it would be hard to get anything in there. Maybe some thin super glue, but it's probably not even worth it. Alright, let's go ahead and address some of the problems on the front. Alright, it looks like we're missing a knob here on the front, and the reason for that is a pretty common problem, and it's because the shaft on this pot was basically crushed or squeezed together too much, and it probably made that knob fall right off. I'll get a close-up picture of that to show you. Now sometimes you can get a screwdriver in the middle of those two sides of that pot to spread the little post out a little bit. In this case, I think it's a little bit too far crushed, so I'm going to try using a utility blade and get in there. And when you're expanding these back out, you have to be careful not to break them because they don't like to bend more than maybe once or twice. Alright, we're starting to see some space there now. I think I'm to the point now where I can probably get a screwdriver in there and finish this up. Alright, well that about does it. So let's go ahead and put a knob on there. On most Strats, when you're lining your knobs, you'll note that 10 almost always points at this bridge pickup when the pot is turned all the way up. Alright, nice. Well, this knob is a little bit lighter than the other two, but it is an American style tone knob or a Mexican style tone knob. They're identical, and it seems to fit these metric pots just fine. Before we take this thing apart and we look at the components of the pickguard, let's go ahead and get some readings off of these pickups. Looks like the bridge pickup in this one is about 3.58 kilo ohms. Same with the middle, and just about the same with the neck, 3.57. Seems like we can classify these as pretty standard output pickups. And before I blow this totally apart, let's go ahead and tune it up to pitch, and I'll check the neck relief. Usually when I check neck relief, I like to figure out what the radius of the guitar neck is first. I suspect that this one is a 9.5 because a lot of modern Strats are, and it looks like that is indeed the case. Now I like to see around 10 thousandths of relief on a 9.5 inch radius neck. 12 thousandths is pretty okay too, and of course some of that is going to be player preference. To measure that, I'm putting a capo at the 1st fret. I'm going to flip this guitar up and fret it at the 17th on the E string. Then I'm going to take a feeler gauge and insert it at the 8th fret. Alright, this one looks like I could use a small tightening, so let me do that. Most of these guitars use a 5mm wrench. Alright, about a 1/4 turn got this one perfect, so let's move on. Next I want to see what kind of things are going on inside this body. I'm going to be looking for what type of wood this body is, if it's made out of plywood or a solid type of wood, and also of course what's going on with these electronics. So let me detune. I want to try to save these strings, so I'm going to detune, put a capo on the 1st fret, then we'll take off the neck. Before I forget, this is a great time to clean up any junk in between your pickups. Alright, well inside here we see mini pots. They're definitely 250K pots. We've got one of those breadboard style, PCB style switches in here. And we've got a decent set of double ceramic bar magnets on these single coil pickups. This is a design that Fender used kind of on the Mexican Strats of the 90s and maybe even into the 2000s. And they made their way into these Squiers around this time period as well. The main difference I usually see between these pickups and the Mexican counterparts is the thickness of the lead wire. The Squier ones also usually have a part number sticker on the back. There's probably other differences as well. Those are just the ones that I note off the top of my head. The body itself, it's definitely solid wood. It looks to me to probably be an agathis body. I'll have to double check that and report back. The routing is definitely an HSH routing pattern, and it's got holes drilled for the screws to recess deeply in here, and even on the humbuckers it's got enough room for brackets to go deep. It's definitely painted with shielding paint, and there's actually a grounding screw, which you don't always see on Squiers. And let's go ahead and take a peek inside the jack cavity. Everything's pretty standard in here. I don't see shielding paint inside the jack cavity. There is a shielded wire that runs from the volume pot to this jack, and this jack is a pretty standard Squier jack. Not much to it, it's just really thin metal. In terms of the tremolo, it's also pretty standard, and it's got the cast saddles. As we saw earlier, it's got a thin block in the back. It's got 3 springs and a grounded claw. And I guess the last piece of hardware on this is the strap buttons themselves, which are pretty standard Squier as well. The Affinity strap buttons are slightly better than the SE Stratocasters, only because they're a little bit wider. Well, I've got a little bit of work ahead of me to put this thing back together, but while we're here, I will note one more thing about the neck. 21 frets. And by the way, it's a really nice neck. There really are no sharp edges on any of the frets. Other than a tiny bit of fret wear, this neck is pretty perfect. Before I forget to mention it, a good thing to do when you've got your guitar in this stage is to go ahead and clean the pots and the switch. I like to use this deoxit with this needle applicator. That way I can inject it into the switch and work that switch back and forth. And then when it comes to the pots, the needle applicator helps you get inside the pot, and then you can work that pot back and forth with your fingers as well. All this is going to do is clean up any scratchiness in any of the pots. Now, I was mostly done with this little Squier, but I did notice one thing during reassembly, and it's that this bottom strap button here was attached with a screw that was really just spinning in its hole. I told you before that I knew it had been dropped on the strap button because of this little finish crack here, and obviously the divot around the hole itself. But once I got this out, I realized that this probably was never fixed correctly. It looks like they've added a rubber washer to the screw to prevent it from spinning, but it probably spun anyway because there's plenty of glue on the threads of this screw, and there's a lot of toothpicks that have been shoved up inside this hole here. So I thought it'd be worth showing you how to fix this thing right and fix it permanently with a dowel rod. Now, since this is such an enlarged hole from the previous work that's been done on it, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch dowel rod. That's not normally necessary. A lot of times you can get by with an 1/8 or a 3/16. What I'm going to do is drill this out to a 1/4 inch. Then we're going to install a piece of dowel rod, also a 1/4 inch in diameter, inside that hole and let it dry. And we're going to be using wood glue for this. Alright, now you can do this where you drill the hole out and then put a full-size dowel rod in there and then cut the end of the dowel off. I've gone ahead and drilled my hole out to roughly the right size depth that I need, and I've got a dowel that's long enough to cover the entire threads of the new screw. So that's going to be good enough, and it's going to mean I don't have to do any cutting at the end of this. Now I want to get glue inside the hole and on the dowel, so I'm going to use a long screw to put some glue inside the hole here, and then I'll roll this in glue and we'll hammer it in place. Alright, now once that dries, it'll be ready for us to re-drill another hole. That repair is small enough to be covered by the strap button itself, but another trick you can use if you have to use a larger dowel than this is to use a felt washer under the strap button. So here it is all wrapped up, and I'll get you a picture of the remounted strap button. Also, before we call it quits today, I did want to correct a couple of things. I looked up a few more details about this guitar, and it is considered a Strat Pack guitar, and it would have come with a Fender Frontman 10G. The specs on this one say that the body is supposed to be alder, although to be honest it didn't look like it to me, and it's 40 millimeters thick. Believe it or not, it is supposed to come with a black backplate, even though it has a white single-ply front pick guard. And one thing I didn't mention about the neck is that it's a slim C profile. I got most of these details from a site called fuzzfaced.net. I really like that site for Stratocaster specs, so I'll link that and put it in the description. At any rate, thank you all for hanging with me through these episodes. I appreciate all the likes and all the comments. Please be sure to check out my description for links to some of the parts and other things in this episode. Thanks to all you subscribers, and I'll see you guys next time.